Is that us?
Hi, everyone. You can hear us now? Oh, great.
Yep.
Okay. Just trying something a little different, so the mute button and I weren't agreeing at the moment. We'll just fit into that stereotypical group. So it looks like we have about 50, almost 60 people on the meeting, and just to go through some logistical things that I think everybody's used to, I'll keep everyone on mute. If you want to type in the chat box questions as it comes up, but you can also unmute yourself and ask questions as we go through it. And of course, we'll pause and ask questions when it seems appropriate. Otherwise, we will get started, and hopefully everyone can also see a screen. If you're not logged into the computer, I would suggest you do so you can see the information. And Paul Taylor and Renee Richter are here with me, but Paul is going to present today, so I will turn it over.
Okay. Hi all. Hope everything's going well for you. The caveat, I guess, or the disclaimer to this discussion is I looked forward to having this presentation. We chose to wait until May with the idea that I would have the very final numbers available for you for the state major maintenance aid distribution that's going to occur later this month. And as I scurried around on the first few days of May in an attempt to determine the total amount available out of the coal subtrust that goes towards paying a portion of these funds, I found out that some of those invested accounts still aren't finalized, and so we'll know within the next week or so. So I didn't want to push this presentation off another week on anybody because this had been scheduled. So I have to apologize. I don't have final numbers, but I have roundabout guesstimates, just like I've had for the past year. So we'll do our best. So that was my disclaimer on the beginning of this thing. Before we get going through the PowerPoint, I want to share a document that, oops, how do I do this again? I thought I did the escape. Yeah. Up on the school finance website, under accounting, so if you go to opi.mt.gov, you go to school finance, which is under leadership, and you click on the button that says accounting, and then about school finance, there's a section that's called webinars. And in that area are the PowerPoint presentation that I will get into in a few minutes, but there's also a Excel spreadsheet. I hope it opens. Yep, sure did. And I want to somehow hide this from me. Okay, so this is a summary of how the districts budgeted, all 400 districts budgeted in their building reserve fund for state major maintenance aid. And I need to say this, Renee and I kind of had this conversation. I don't want to say that as I scroll through this, I'm not implying in any way that anybody did anything wrong, they didn't do anything right. There's reasons for why you may or may not budget certain ways. It's local control. Some of the items, some of the concepts or thoughts that we came up with for maybe why people budgeted differently for the state major maintenance aid include some of the following. Perhaps the return of state dollars wasn't so good. The state return to some districts was as low as 14 cents on the dollar for a local, the local dollar put in, all the way up to $4 per every one local dollar put in. So maybe the return wasn't good. We thought that maybe some districts were attempting to save their taxpayers money and they didn't want to, go into this program. Maybe they had voted levy and they didn't want to have both the voted and the permissive. Concepts relating to maybe some districts didn't have many taxpayers and they just didn't want to burden those people with them. Or perhaps your district receives impact aid or oil and gas and that you're using those funds for major maintenance instead. But nevertheless, we went ahead and put together the spreadsheet just so you have a main source to look at how your school compares to other schools across the state. And actually, this spreadsheet is sort of like the driving force behind where the PowerPoint ends up. So you may want to keep it in mind. I'm just going to scroll through it real quick, and show you the breakdown. Up in this top area, there's certain columns. It shows the total box size, which is a calculation of A and B of the prior year, with a base amount multiplied 15,000 plus $100 per every A and B. I added in the return per dollar of local effort. This is how much the district permissively levied. This is the state return, and you can see these are both empty in this case, and the reason for that is because these districts, in the comment, you can see they didn't levy, so no levy means no state dollar support. This is a total of the two. I color coordinated the next two columns to go with the other pinkish columns to say these would have been the optimum levy amounts to get the optimum state return to fill the box completely if the districts chose to levy. And like I said, there's no right or wrong in this. Many of these districts didn't levy for their own purpose, but I wanted to sort of scroll through it real quick. And actually the PowerPoint ends up kind of in this area. As I scroll down, we get to a couple other color groupings. This blue group here is a group of districts that levied less than the optimum amount. So in this case, this district levied $5,000, whereas the optimum amount levied to get the most state return would have been around $6,004 or $6,500. These particular districts in this long group here, they maximize the levy to, or they levy to maximize the state return. And not finally. This group of districts in this orange area, they levied more than the optimum amount to levy. I guess the most reasonable consideration for why a district would have done this is to overcome any uncertainty as to how full the state return would be for them, that they predicted that there would be a state shortfall. And so they were trying to assure that they could fill their box with guaranteed money, and the property taxes are more guaranteed than not, I guess, in this case. And then finally, this group down here, they decided to not receive any state funds whatsoever. They went ahead and levied to fill the box in totality and sort of squeezed themselves out of receiving any state funds, because the box is the cap, and then you can't receive funds past that cap. And so if you fill the box fully with total levied dollars, you squeeze out your ability to receive state funds. I guess personally, if for any of these, this is the group that I would hope to see maybe change their minds going forward. And we'll get to that too. Part of this is about thinking on budgets for next year. So it's just sort of like a brief to get you started. That way you get to see your school, you get to see where you land related to your friends and neighbors and maybe regions or whatnot. And maybe you can contemplate reasons why other districts may or may not have levied the same way you did. So I just want to share that with you. It's out on our website. So let's take that. Oops. And let's walk through this. So this is a summary, not quite a summary yet, because as I started off, I said I don't have the final numbers, and I really wish I had. But so let's take a walk through the 2020 summary and use some of the knowledge of how 2020 played out to inform us about how we could sort of view the 2021 year and the potential budget cycle that you're right in the middle of, or maybe even somewhat past. So to get going, Currently, statute 20-9635, in statute, it states that there is a state major maintenance aid amount, and for 2020, the amount that was appropriated was $6.4 million. Going forward to next year is going to be $7.6 million for 21. And then forward of that is 10 million per year. Believe it or not, the statute actually goes ahead and talks about the next 2 years thereafter, and it's slightly modified once again to be greater than $10 million. But I don't want to get into that yet. I want to stick with the 2020 summary and talk about 2021. And hopefully I'll never have to have this conversation with you after we get up to 10 million, and let's just hope the statute stays the way it does, and then it gets fully funded. So here's the one of the two kickers that I want to work through in this PowerPoint. If you notice, part of the statute says, yeah, there's $6.4 million appropriated, but what it says is each year the appropriation is reduced by the amount projected earnings from the school facilities fund pursuant to a part of section 17. Okay. So what they're talking about here is $6.4 million was appropriated. They went ahead and created a coal subtrust that is an interest-bearing subtrust. The corpus is the coal trust. The subtrust then accrues a portion of the interest off that coal. And so back when legislation occurred, they determined that the coal subtrust should accrue about $1.6 million for fiscal year 20. So they took the 6.4 million and subtracted off 1.6 and said the state general fund will support almost $8 million, and the remainder will be funded through the interest off the coal subtrust. So let's take a look at that a little bit further. So there were two appropriations, one from the state general fund and one from a state special revenue fund, the coal subtrust. Anything that's going to come out of the state general fund is, well, I want to say guaranteed to be funded in full, but yeah, it's guaranteed to be funded in full. Anything that's been appropriated out of a state special revenue fund means just that. It was appropriated to materialize, but in the event that it didn't materialize, the law for this distribution says proration will occur. So at the time when I made this PowerPoint, which was actually a couple months back, this is what I had written at the time. And now that we're in May, and see it says estimated to be funded near full, we're going to know that in May. Yeah, I know, it's May. Here's my update. The update that I was provided around May 1st or May 2nd said that the total amount of interest that the coal subtrust had in it as of the 5th was $1,274,000. But I'm told that not all the interest is in there yet, so we have to wait until we find out how much more interest will be deposited in there before the distribution of May payment occurs. But let's go with worst case situation. All right, we got appropriated 1.6 and almost 3 million has come in. So there's a $300,000 shortfall or a 5.36% shortfall from the full 6.4. So that's one of our problems, I suppose. So if this number holds and if no more interest gets deposited, which I'm assured is not going to be the case, so the 5.36% should be smaller as we go forward in the next week and a half. This is one of the reasons for why a distribution is going to create somewhat of a budget shortfall for you in this 2020 cycle. The second situation is this. Oops. Okay, so again, we're sort of back where I was before. I said, okay, the 4.7 or the 4.8 is guaranteed at state general fund. Yes, I understand the coal sub trust appropriated the 1.6 to total the 6.4. I keep hopping too fast. Here's our second somewhat of an issue. There's 400 districts, and some of them budgeted to receive funds. And they budgeted to receive funds in excess of the $6.4 million appropriated towards the program in 2020. So districts across the state actually budgeted to receive $6.5 million, or $150,000 over the appropriation limit. That's a second reason for a proration, because we don't have authority to distribute funds past the 6.4 million. It actually created a proration of 2.28%. So we're going to add that 2.28 to the 5.3, so you're a little past 7% shortfall. But I have a side story, and it's been eating at me since last year. And I know I do this to you guys all the time. The $150,000 shortfall is actually modified into a $131,000 shortfall, which actually lowered the proration to closer to 2%. So here's my ask of you in the future, and I'm going to be a little preachy here. I hope my manager doesn't get too upset with me. Here's what we noticed occurred. There are 2 school districts in the state that budgeted money towards this permissive levy to receive state funds in a certain amount. What happened after they submitted their budgets to their county treasurer? The county treasurer, in their wisdom, modified the number of mills to support the program upward, in maybe misunderstanding the purpose of levying a certain number of mills to return a certain number of dollars. Well, consequently, when the county modified the mills, it's going to return more dollars to the school. And in doing so, it squeezes out the amount of state funds that district could have received from the state. Bad for that particular school, but what it did was the excess state funds then get put back into the pile of money and then get distributed to all the rest of you. So what I'm asking, because it really hurts my feelings to think that these 2 schools, although they're going to get more local dollars, they got squeezed out of receiving state dollars. Next time we go around the budget cycle, whatever your county treasurers decide to modify your mills to, have a conversation with them and say, hey, we're levying to receive a certain number of dollars, because it's all based on dollars, not mills. It's all, although it seems like a GTB model, and it is, it's based on the number of dollars, not the number of mills. Modify the mills, modify the dollars that your district receives. Potentially, you may lose out on some state funding. I don't want that to happen to you. So keep an eye on that this fall. Okay, I preached long enough on my side story. Any comments? I hope that came out pretty well. All right. Oh, shoot, where were we? Okay. So those are the 2 things that are going on that are going to create a proration. One is the coal sub trust comes in short. The other is we're all anticipating a budgeted amount from the state that surpassed the amount of the appropriation authority. So it's looking at, as of today, about a 7% proration, which is a little bit more than what I was hoping for. And like I said, the coal sub trust isn't a done deal. I was really hoping it would be. So let's use that to think about next year. So in 2021, well, it's no longer $6.4 million appropriated. Now it's $7.6 million appropriated. The coal sub trust is estimated to return more interest than it did in the first year. Is that going to happen? Well, I don't know. With the coronavirus situation and with the downturn of the economy, and if there isn't a fast rebound, I don't know what's going to happen to the interest on that corpus for this particular subtrust. One thing I can say, though, is the state general fund appropriated amount also increased. So it's sort of the same deal. So here they are side by side. So again, you have additional $2.1 million in authority between 20 years, fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2021, but only about 600,000 of that is guaranteed increased off the general fund. The remainder is an increase off of interest. And so now I'm not so sure. I used to feel real confident in saying, yeah, go ahead and budget for the max, but now I'm not quite so confident in making that statement anymore. What I do know is whatever you all decide to budget towards, if there's a proration of, say, 7%, it's the same 7% that gets applied to all districts who budgeted, no matter if they over levied or maximized their levy or under levied. So let's break that out a little bit further. Just to recap, the major maintenance aid box is $15,000 plus $100 per budget limit A and B. If I sum up the whole state, that's about 22 million box size. It's not really a dollar size. If we were all to budget to fill the boxes in the most efficient way, the local levy would be about $12 million. The remainder will be paid for through state funds, approximately 10 million. And so when you look at the ramp up for this program in statute, going back all the way to the earlier slides, that's where the $10 million number comes from. Let's recap again. Fiscal year 20. The box size, of course, is the same size because it's the same state. But districts actually levied about $10.2 million, a little bit less than most efficient for all 400 districts, because some districts over levied, some districts didn't levy at all. And the return of the requested state payment is this $6.5+ million. The reason it's not directly proportional to what you may notice in the upper boxes is because the return's different for every district. Like I said, some districts it was only 14 cents on the dollar, and maybe those districts did or didn't levy. So we don't have to get into that. Sort of a noodling idea. So that's where we are for 2020. So let's talk about each one of those groups. And this is where I said I was going to go back to talking about that spreadsheet. 400 districts operational in the state of Montana for fiscal year 20, and 230 districts, or about 57% of the districts, actually levied towards this program. I keep hopping too fast. Let's break out what the districts did of the ones who did levy. 5 districts completely filled the box, and that provided state support of $0. It's about 1% of the districts in the state, a little less. Some districts levied greater than the maximum return for state dollars, so I'm calling that over levied. It's not really an over levy. But so 72 districts made that decision, and about 18% of the districts. State support for these folks is about $1.7 million. 139 districts, or 35% of the districts of the state who actually made a levy, maximized their levy to return the maximum amount of state support. There's where the bulk of districts reside, of about $4.7 million. And then some districts chose to under levy, meaning levy less than the maximum for the maximum state return. And so what happened is they weren't able to fill the box by adding together both local levy plus state support. It just didn't get them to the full box size. There were 14 districts that chose to do that. And then 170 districts didn't levy at all. I actually have a point for all this. I know I'm getting there. So that's the breakout of what we all did across the state for fiscal year 2020. I recognize we have to prorate you down to the $6.4 million and then also a proration additional for whatever actually comes in that coal subtrust. But let's play what if for a minute. What if all the districts were to adjust what they had done in fiscal year 2020 to maximize the state support? Well, the 5 districts that filled the box completely, they could have lowered their levies, and they could have, and in doing so, they would have gotten some state money. If they had lowered their levies to maximize the state return, it's about 116 or 117,000. The districts who levied more than the maximum, well, if they were to have lowered their levies slightly more, the state would have been on the hook to distribute another $700,000. Those of you who budgeted to maximize the state return, well, I sort of threw it in a range, so it would have adjusted by about $800. And let's say the districts who under levied and under received state funds, let's say they increased their levies to the maximum, that sweet spot, well, it would have increased state support by about $80,000. And all the districts who chose not to levy at all, if they were all to levy to maximize the state return, we're talking about an additional $2.7 million. So this is where I got to get out my magic 8-ball. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and say the 170 districts that didn't levy in 2020, I'm going to just say, just as a what if they choose not to levy in 2021, I can sort of get rid of that $2.7 million problem there. That's the total of everybody. If I was to ignore the folks who didn't levy in 20 and assume that they're not going to levy in 2021, the increase to the full appropriation need would increase by almost $900,000. So this is where it's kind of like I'm on sort of like out on thin ice here. I'm saying, oh, okay, like you didn't levy in 20, maybe you won't do it again. I was going through those reasons for why maybe people aren't levying. That's why you need to look over the list. Are the impact aid schools? Do they receive oil and gas? Maybe they just weren't ready. Maybe they're going to levy in 2021, but I'm not so sure. But basically, if you work it out by ignoring those guys, if you think about it, in 2020, the request for state funding was about $6.5 million. If we add in the folks to, if everybody's to adjust their budgets just so to get the maximized state return, we could add another $800,000, almost $900,000. So if you add those two numbers together, you get $7.4 million. Well, it just so happens that the appropriation in 2021 is $7.6 million. And I hear you, this was going to be my preach. Everybody needs to clean up how they're levying and get this thing spot on because the economy's rolling and interest is going to come in on that coal subtrust. 2 months ago, that was going to be my big preach. Now I'm not so sure. So whatever the coal subtrust is shorted in 2021, I can't tell you at this point. But, there are things that we have to consider. Like I just mentioned, the coal subtrust shortage in 2021. Growth in A and B across the state is going to modify this view also. And also the big one is, of all the districts who chose not to levy in 2020, I don't know how many more districts will choose to levy and sort of eat into the state request for funding in 2021. One thing I can say with some confidence is this. As we look forward to fiscal year 2021, and the appropriation is $7.6 million. Let's say none of the coal subtrust money comes in. Let's say that's zero and only the general fund money's there. I know that's not really reality. Whatever you do, don't budget to receive less than 74.6% of the state funding, because that portion is coming out of the state general fund and is somewhat more guaranteed. And because it is the second year of the biennium, the state is required to make that distribution. And unfortunately, I'm not sure what to say about the coal subtrust, but I would assume it's something north of that 74.6% that you would receive in total, because it's interest off of an already existing source of funds, the corpus on that coal. So that's my presentation for that. By the way, there's one of my goofy dogs that climbed up the mountain with me and ran in circles. But the last thing I wanted to do before we start taking some questions, let's get rid of this thing again. There we go. All right. Can I do this? I don't want to do updates. Okay.
It's just the macro. If you update and put yes, it's fine.
But my spreadsheet doesn't have any macros. I took them all out. Okay.
Did you? Oh.
Yeah. Oh no. Let's hope this still works for us. So here's the general fund budgeting spreadsheet, and this is just for the folks out there that maybe still aren't aware as to what some of the functioning of this spreadsheet is. This is the fiscal year 2021 general fund budgeting spreadsheet that's not so general fund anymore. I just want to pop in an example. I'm going to use Grant Elementary. And if you enter in a district's LE and a taxable value, I know their taxable value is a little greater than $1.6 million. So if you pop in an LE and a taxable value, there's a tab on the bottom here that's called Building Reserve. And I just kind of wanted to give you the rundown on how this works one last time in case you haven't heard this yet. What this sheet is telling you is this district has a box size of $15,700. And what we've done is we've calculated this is the return on every dollar the district puts in. The state is supposed to pitch in $1.57 towards this district, all the way up until you fill the box completely. So what I've done here is I created a calculation that says, well, what is the optimum amount of levy to return the optimal amount of state return? And it turns out that $6,111.25, which is approximately 3.82 mils. You can't surpass 10 mils for elementary and high schools. You can't surpass 20 mils for a K-12. If you were to levy this dollar amount, the state return should be $9,588, and that would fill that box completely. What I was talking about earlier was you can come down here a little bit, and you can punch in the amount that you would like to levy, or you're anticipating levying. This would be a circumstance that has some confidence in saying that the full $7.6 million would be there and available. And so it would say, well, here's the permissive levy, and here's the state aid for that, and it's totally filling the box. And if you wanted to say, hey, but I understand from this presentation that I shouldn't budget to receive anything less than, oh goodness, what was it, 74-point-some%? Good job paying attention to my own presentation. Then what you could do is you can modify this value to determine what the return is, because this is saying that there's a certain amount of Smma box remaining, because by saying 74%, I'm actually taking the state amount then and reducing it by 74%. So you could up the levy a little bit. But I sort of go back to my comment earlier. Philosophically, if we're going to be short 7%, I would take 7% from this district as just the same way as I'm going to take 7% from any district. And so if you don't budget to spend the full amount, I still sort of stand by my comment that I've made on the phone at least 100 times. Budget to receive the maximum, even if there is a shortfall, and then assume that the full amount of state fundings won't be coming in full in the first couple of years of this program. Yeah, I could be wrong about my theories. Different districts have different requirements for these dollars in short-term situations. I've always considered this a reserve fund so that it could build up funds over a series of years. Your philosophy may be different from mine, and I certainly don't run a school. I'm just some state guy that talks about this stuff occasionally with you. That's really all I wanted to present. I wanted to hear your comments and questions. Last time I'm going to say it, I apologize so deeply. I really thought I would have final numbers for you. And I could say, yeah, see, this is where this all landed. This is how this turned out. We'll know in the next week and a half what we're going to do with this. I think it's going to be something less than 7% as a reduction. But that's what I've got. What do we have for questions? Or do you guys have things you want to add?
No, there was one question about how to calculate to maximize that, but you answered that. Martha says it's helpful. It's shaky for budgeting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you guys do have power on your own to unmute yourselves. I gave you that authority. Went a little crazy. So if you have a question, do unmute yourself and ask it. Now's a good time. John's saying if we over levied, does that mean we took more money from our taxpayers than needed?
Well, it's an interesting concept. I mean, this is kind of where my theoretical concepts go. If you over levied, it meant, I'm not saying over levied, I'm saying you levied more than where you could have levied to receive the maximum state return. Well, what you've done is, I'll just have to use the words, if you've over levied, while you're guaranteeing yourself to receive the funds into this permissive sub-fund for your use, but you may be limiting the number of state dollars. In lowering the number of state dollars, though, if I prorate you by 7%, well, 7% off of a smaller state money is less of a hit to your district. So, yes, you levied more than necessary, but then again, you protected yourself slightly better than a district that didn't.
Yeah, and John, just to add to that, our system will not allow you to adopt a budget to levy higher than what is allowed in your what we call box size. So as far as the law goes, you cannot over levy the way our system's set up. Just to add that, Denise is asking if you can do a follow-up webinar when we have the exact numbers. And Denise, what my plan was is to put a spreadsheet out there with an email and send it out and say, here's the final numbers, here's what you're going to see in the payment. And certainly if people have questions, they can give us a call. But we can do a webinar. If people want to go over this again, just let us know. Does anybody else have any other questions? And I'm just curious, maybe if you could pop in the chat box, next time I might get smart and figure out how to do a Zoom poll, but are there districts on the line that will have not levied in 2020, but will levy in 2021?
Good question.
Yeah, if I were thinking, I'd have done a poll. The payment is expected to go out in May. Yeah, Bynum's going to levy in 2021. Okay. Oh, okay. I don't know.
So if we were to get a poll and we were to know of the 141 districts, how many more are going to make the decision to levy, what we could do is we could look on that Excel spreadsheet or maybe a new one for 2021 and see what the return is. Like, so let's say Bynum is going to levy coming up and they decide to levy for the max, but let's say that their return is 14 cents. Well, that really isn't much of an impact to anybody across the state. If it was a huge school, let's say a Great Falls, and they didn't levy last year, but they choose to levy this year coming up, and their return is $4 per every dollar they put in. Now we all have to throw a little, put a little caution into what we're thinking. So it's actually a vicious system. It's predicated on, will the revenues materialize from the state coal subtrust? But they also pit you all against each other in this circumstance. Really all we could do is hope for the best and assure that going forward into the next session, the $10 million, I pray, will be upheld, and that the cool thing is we get a fresh cut point, right, or a fresh look at it. What they'll have to do during this session coming up is they now get to say, oh, well, the coal subtrust interest isn't coming in very good. So it says $10 million, but the state general fund is going to have to ante up a bigger percentage of that and a smaller percentage of coal subtrust. And that may be actually in everybody's best interest. But I don't know what's going to happen with the economy or with interest rates going forward. So 2022 is going to be much less shaky than 2021 going in, because this was information that we're using from a point in time that's going to have been 2 years earlier.
Yeah. Denise is saying, and I see people have put in what we'll levy. There are some new ones, so we have the chat box. We'll take a look at that. Denise is saying districts that intend to do this permissive levy for the first time in 2021 should have disclosed the increase on their notice of intent, which was published by March 31st. Yes. Yes. Hopefully all of you that said, yep, we are going to add it, did that. And I know I've talked to a couple of those districts, and yeah, they were including that. That is a good point. Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. Make that, make that 2022 then. Yeah.
What do we make in 2022?
One district didn't notice their levy in 2021.
Oops. Yeah.
Hey, there's the next year. You'll get it. Thank you for the information, Paul. Your tab on the budget spreadsheet is helpful.
Great. Glad to hear
it. Is the payment going to the county or to the school district's separate bank accounts? If you have your own account, it will go to your own account, but if you bank with your county, it will go to your county.
And what's they deposited? What's the revenue code?
3283 is the revenue code.
I'm just trying to avoid the phone call of what fund and what was the source code we have to book this under, and so might as well have it said.
Yeah, you're right. Fund 61, sub fund 613, since it's the one, and 3283 is the revenue. Yeah. Yeah, so Melvin, I think, yeah, you are on your own account, I believe, so you should get that in your own account, yes. But May also has GTB, which goes to the county, so don't expect that. Well, no, it has retirement GTB that goes to the county. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just confusing it. Anybody else have any other questions? Anything else you're curious about while we have extra time? Okay.
Thanks, y'all.
We will. Have a great day, everyone.